captivity after captivity, punishment after punishment, and still be telling them the same thing. Turn around, turn around, turn around. You're going the wrong way. Why? Because they were going the wrong way. But the wrong way was as unto them a right way. All right. This is another lesson in the New Testament is Fake series. This is May 13, 2018. This is lesson number 148. And I'm glad you're listening to this lesson today. I really want to share some more in the New Testament is Fake series on the sacrifices of the Old Testament and the New Testament. This lesson is titled The Altar of the Lord. I understand just how you may feel because these things I'm sharing, not new because I'm presenting them. There are lots of people showing these points in the scriptures. But I think that when we come to understand that something is wrong with what we have been taught all along, there's a shock nature to it that lets us try to get away from what we're hearing, what we're faced with. As I deal with different people on this topic of the New Testament being fake and of the sacrifices in the Torah being a setup for Calvary, people are just in shock, and they, if I put it in the Christian terms, like when I was in the Christian church, they would basically say you're backsliding from the Torah or from being an Israelite and so on. Because it is so shocking to them that, the whole thing is just repulsive. As I've looked for many months now on religious teaching and religious thought in the world and religion creation, I noticed that a lot of religions share the same kind of teachings. There's only so much difference you can have. And whatever differences there are some core things that will always remain the same for the most part. For instance, you need to worship some kind of deity in some form. That's usually one of the common things. And for the most part, there is a book that goes along with that religion. I've talked about this before many, many videos ago. I read somewhere long time ago, I can't remember where, of someone who said you can usually tell what a religion is about or a people are about, like what they believe, by looking at their religion and also the buzzwords in that religion or the words that frequently occur when worshiping or studying in that religion. Now, it's not that I'm trying to fight against your religion because it is wrong. That's not the driving thing here. But I am more just trying to express what I believe because I've been taught so much what to believe. Now I want to express to the world that I no longer believe certain things because they are ridiculous, they don't make sense, and a lot of times they are simply created by the person across town, who in some cases may have even subjugated you or your people. In some cases, they were doing it just to make money, to get rich, and so on, doing it for political reasons. So you have to understand that when someone finds out that they've been tricked, in this case by religion, they're going to want to speak about it. Now, in the Israelite community, people are just in shock, and they think that I should just teach the same thing that they've always been taught and say it the same way and believe the same things and so on. And you're allowed to have certain minor differences, but they really have to be minor. But I don't know. All I know is I feel what I feel, I see what I see, and I have to speak what I speak. We take the people from the scriptures, like in the Torah, and a man can come and tell you that he got a message from God. And then that man can later on send you to go and kill a king, push a knife in him, and then flee, run, take off for your life. And that's fine. You still believe that man. After a couple thousand years, you still believe him because he said he was a prophet or he acted like one. You can get somebody who you say is prophet, priest, and king, like Moses or maybe like David. And you can say this man is righteous. And then he will, as the king of Israel, and a man with a prophecy writing on him that he will take the throne from Saul, the first king of Israel. And you love him and you sing the praises of David like they sang it in the days of the scriptures. But this same David would decide, who himself wore an ephod, it seems, that it was okay to go among the Philistines, the enemy to the nation of Israel at a certain point, and go into the enemy's territory and live among them for salvation, even though salvation is in the mount of the Lord. Salvation is upon Jerusalem. But he fled to the Philistines for salvation at a certain point in his life. And he, even with his own voice that prophesied the words of the Lord that we still read today. And when you get to Psalm 72, it says, and the prayers of David are ended. This is the kind of man who would give his word to the Philistines. He would give his word to the enemy that he will fight with them against the children of Israel, his own people, that he prophesied to, that he learned from, that he lived among, and that he was ruling over by a divine decree through the prophet Samuel, that he would take the throne from out of the house of King Saul. But he will fight with the Lord of the Philistines against the children of Israel, against Zion, against sweet Jerusalem, against the children of Israel that the Most High took out of the land of Egypt in their time of bondage. But David can do something that would seem so evil to us, and you will still embrace David when he says A or B. But there is no way you can embrace someone who in 2018 will say to you, I have a word, or I have an unpopular word, or I have what might seem to you a vicious word, or a contradictory word to the scriptures, to the Torah. It is contrary to what is written in the Torah, but I am not killing you. But David vowed from his heart, the same heart that worshipped the Lord, to go and fight and kill the children of Israel. And it's all right to love David, but you must hate me. But anyway, let's go on with the lesson, the altar of the Lord. And I hope that you will take another look at the scriptures and just really be seeking for truth. Don't seek for what your previous teacher or your current teacher taught you. Don't seek like that. seek for truth. You say you're looking for the old time stuff. How do you know what was there in the old times when you never lived there? The main way that we find out about what was in the old time is by like archaeological finds and so on, but most of us don't do that ourselves. So the main way is more by listening to other people or reading books. If a book was written just 5 years ago and you found it online or in a store and you bought it, it's just written recently. So while you will read those books, you have to be setting out on a search not for a book, but for truth. Because truth happened before a book was written about it. And if they destroy all the books on the earth right now or in your country, truth will still be around in the earth. I was looking online today and I saw someone say something that I thought for myself as well for some time now. I asked a question and people are scared. I'm scared of it too, because this is a shock to me as well. But I wondered, why did they offer a bull in the Torah or a lamb or so? Like, why not certain other kinds of animals? Like, why not a cat or a dog? Bull was in Egypt, they offered bull and so on. Well, Egypt dealt with dogs. They worshipped alligators and all kinds of stuff. And there are people that are telling you they never worshipped any kind of animals. But when I look at all the cultures of the earth that did these kinds of things, looks like they had it as a part of their whole worship scheme. But why not an alligator that was offered by the children of Israel? You know, the same alligator that's connected to Jesus Christ on Calvary, the Messiah, the Son of the living God. But that's going to be for a lesson down the road. Or why didn't they offer an orangutan, like an ape? You'd be like, no. You go look up some ape online now and it's like, no. They couldn't offer that. That's not Torah based. But you tell me that a bull or a sheep is Torah based. So let's look at Judges 2 and verse 2 to 4. And ye shall make no league with the inhabitants of this land. Ye shall throw down their altars, but ye have not obeyed my voice. Why have ye done this? Right away there, you have to understand that regardless of how you feel, the Most High is telling them that they were operating with some heathen altars. You say, well, they had their own altars as well, Israelite altars. But pagan altars would become Israelite altars. Wherefore I also said, I will not drive them out from before you, but they shall be as thorns in your sides, and their gods shall be a snare unto you. If they ended up in the captivity, and you say today you are Israelites scattered, were they a snare unto your people? Were they a snare unto the children of Israel? A snare means they are trapped, and they could not get out. Did your forefathers get out of a trap that brought a curse? Are you out of a curse right now, or are you trapped in a curse that you can't do anything about? And you pray and hope all the time this is the last president before deliverance. Because their gods became a snare unto you, a trap unto you. If you can't get out, then it means gods trapped you, the gods of the Canaanites, with their altars, their sacrifices, their ways. And it came to pass, when the angel of the Lord spake these words unto all the children of Israel, that the people lifted up their voice and wept. Why would they weep? You 2018 Israelite. Why? Because they were guilty. They were doing just what was said right there. They were using the Canaanite sacrificial system to worship the gods that came along with those altars that they did not destroy. They were guilty, so they wept over it. The whole nation, it said, they wept as if it's just one crime. Why were they weeping like that if they were not guilty? Israel built a practice upon Canaanite religious foundations. They built a practice out of that to worship the Most High. You can be as upset as you want. I'm not mad at you for any reason. I'm just teaching what the scriptures say that my eyes can now see, that I didn't see when I first left the Christian church. You act like the only things that can be seen are the things that you saw when you left the Christian church or when your teachers started teaching you to pull you out of the Christian church. Have you checked out some of your teachers? You want to curse me? Have you checked out what people say about how much they are paid? By people who are not Israelites. Have you checked them out and compared them and their teachings and their lifestyle behind the scenes with what the Torah says an Israelite should be like? But you are quick to put up a barrier between you and whoever else is sent by the Most High. And since this is a New Testament is fake series, I can then just borrow the words of the New Testament Savior who said, "And so persecuted they the prophets that were before." Why? Because they had their own prophets that they loved. So they persecuted the other prophets. Like Jeremiah, I've been reading Jeremiah heavily this week. And they put that man through the ringer. You figure only God could try to punish a man that much. That man cried out to the Most High for what other Israelites were putting him through. So Israel started out a nation coming out of Egypt on what seems clearly to me to be the rituals and practices in terms of the sacrificial system. They started out with a sacrificial system that was used by the other nations. You see, you can be as upset with me as you want. It is impossible for you to prove to me that other nations were not doing the sacrifices of Israel before and after Israel became a nation. So someone just told me, well, the other nations might have been doing sacrifices too, but they were a little different from Israel. Or someone else said, well, Cain and Abel were doing sacrifices and patriarchs and so on were doing these offerings and sacrifices before Israel and before these other nations. You know, I already told you that Psalm 147, 19 and 20 says, "He showeth his word unto Jacob, he hath not done thus with any other nation." So how can the other nations have the sacrifices of Israel? Who taught the nations? And if Jacob got the word that was not shown to anyone else, why would Jacob turn around and teach it to the nations so that the nations are doing it? Because they must have learned from Israel. But then you today are saying you can't teach Gentiles. And note as well that even with the curses, the Most High is saying a nation far from you strange nations with a strange tongue and so on, that you don't even know. They're going to come and punish you, bring you into captivity. So not every nation of earth was close by Israel, and Israel did not know all the nations of the earth, according to what we're finding in the Torah. So how would those nations far away have gotten this sacrificial culture that Israel had? And you're telling me all these nations of the earth that were doing these sacrifices, like Israel, with Israel having only minor changes, would have just somehow all just wanted to do sacrifices all over the earth, like it's a worldwide thing. Because sacrifices in ancient times was a worldwide culture. And it just happens that all nations of the earth just seem to want to do sacrifices, similar to what Israel is doing. Can you imagine that? You are teaching Torah today and saying it's yours. It's your book. This is your history. But not all nations of the earth want to have the Torah and learn the Torah and keep the Torah and live by the Torah. But it just so happens that in ancient times, all nations wanted to live by the Torah, at least in terms of the sacrificial part of it, even if they're not doing it exactly the way as Israel. Or maybe I should turn it around and say Israel is not doing it as exactly as the nations are. Because sacrifices in ancient time was a worldwide culture. Everywhere on earth that I've read, they were doing it. Philistines were doing sacrifices. Greeks later on, Romans, Carthaginians, Etruscans, earlier known people in the scriptures, like the Amalekites. Different ones of them were doing these sacrifices. Why? Doesn't that seem strange to you? And they were doing it, some nations, before Israel came about to be a nation. I already told you already that I can't find information to show that Jericho was as new as they're telling us. What I found is that Jericho was about one of the oldest cities on earth, if not the oldest, up to 10,000 years ago, or 10,000 BC. So you're talking round about 4 or so thousand years before there was a Garden of Eden, and before there was an Adam placed in Eden, I should say. Göbekli Tepe and so many other different places that they're finding out about now. It's like everybody is just doing this stuff, this whole Baal culture from ancient times. Had all these sacrifices. Before Israel was a nation, these other nations were doing their sacrifices. And Israel got a different word that was not shown unto anyone else but Jacob. But Israel comes up and does, at their start of a nation, one of the strongest religious parts of the religions of the nations. Isn't that a bit awkward for Israel to come forward and say we are different, when one of their strongest rituals show them to be just like the other nations? So Israel really followed ancient non-Israelite rituals in terms of the sacrifices that the New Testament was built on and that Calvary was built on. The New Testament is fake. And they got this New Testament altar, which turns out to be a cross that the lamb was put on Golgotha's hill of sorrow. Let's look at Judges 2 again, verse 19 and 22. And it came to pass, when the judge was dead, that they returned and corrupted themselves more than their fathers. So, what you have to understand here is that it's the reverse of what you have been taught to think, to culture your mind in a heathen kind of way. You've been taught that Israel was living right and they had certain times when they went astray. No, Israel was living wrong and they had certain times when they fell in line with the Most High. So, you see, the little time the judge was there, but as soon as the judge is dead, then they went back to the wrong way of living. They corrupted themselves after he was dead. And they did it, what, more than their fathers. Telling you that I'm right on when I say that Israel was more living wrong. They had a culture of wrongness, a culture of corruption. And if a right king or a right judge or so came on, then they might live proper sometimes. But their default way to live was wrong. That's the picture I'm getting. More than their fathers. It's like they could hardly wait for this judge to die because it wasn't in their heart to live right before the Most High. So as soon as the guy is gone, as soon as a king is gone, they're gone back to their regular ways to corrupt themselves and live in corruption. And this case, it said, more than their fathers. Now, when you say Israel's sacrifice was different from the other nations, how? They take somebody else's altar and they put their animals on it and slaughter them. There isn't much of a difference right there. In fact, so close is it to what the heathen were doing that they could actually use the altar of the heathen instead of their own, because the altars were similar. Are you getting what I'm trying to teach you? I'm just going to trivialize it a little bit, but if you got a blue altar and they got a red altar, and then you just switch and start using their red one, there's no big difference, just the color is different. You driving a black car and they're driving a white car, and then you get into their car to be corrupt. It's not much difference. It's just that you're just using their car now. It's the same. So they offer a bull and you offer a lamb. There's no big difference. Still another hairy animal. Still another four-legged creature. Still another flesh creature with blood in it and bones in it and so on. 2 eyes in the head and so on. It's not much of a difference. You and I buy the same kind of car. I get the standard, the S model, you get the SE. You only get a couple different, 1 or 2 different features in the car, but it's pretty much the same kind of car. Your rims are bigger than mine. It's not a big, like it's not a major difference. It's the same kind of car. You just wanted some bigger rims, some bigger tires. So Israel is doing the same kind of sacrifices. Just minor differences, but they're pretty much the same kind of thing. So that when you look back over the ancient world, you would say, rightly so, that there was a worldwide culture of flesh sacrifices or animal sacrifices. And in some cases, people sacrifices. So what are you going to do now? When the nations are offering up their children in sacrifices and Israel are offering their children to sacrifices, you're going to tell me that's different as well? When the Most High complained that they're offering their children up as sacrifices, and he never told them to do that? You see, it's the same. But the other nations offered it where they were at, did it their kind of way. Israel offered it where they were at and did it their kind of way. The valley of slaughter, like it's... What's the real significant difference in that? It's just a culture of flesh sacrifices that the Most High warned against. They're putting these sacrifices on altars that they called in Scripture the altar of the Lord. The Most High never asked anyone to kill any person or animals to worship him. That kind of practice was there before there ever was any such thing as a nation of Israel. When people were doing sacrifices in the Scriptures, there was no nation of Israel. These are ancient practices. Abraham left his father's house with all the gods in it, from a culture that worshipped many gods and sacrificed unto their gods. That's where Abraham came from. So when Abraham is cutting up bird or whatever he did and rams and whatever, Abraham is tapping into a culture that he was used to seeing with his own eyes, that he lived among and was a part of. Just like Moses came out of Israel, out of Egypt, to go sacrifice unto the Lord, having come out of an Egyptian culture that was doing the same kind of bull sacrifices, animal sacrifices in the land of Egypt. And when he came out to go into the wilderness, and they're offering up sacrifices and making a golden calf and so on, they were still in Egyptian territory, it seems to me. So there's no real difference here. You see, sometimes I wonder if it's not the case where the different things happen in the histories and so on, but somebody somehow slipped in the sacrifices of animals in between the verses to make it look like Israel was doing all these things. And in some cases, I mean, you got to think, people. So it says they corrupted themselves more than their fathers in following other gods to serve them and to bow down unto them. How would Israel just know how to corrupt themselves more than even their fathers? And just immediately as soon as a king dies or somebody dies, they just know exactly how to do the sacrifices of the heathen perfectly, till it catches the Most High attention and he gets so upset so fast. It's not like they took like 100, 200, 500 years to learn slowly how to do these things. Immediately they started to corrupt themselves pretty much, doing it perfectly until they're doing it better than their fathers, corrupting themselves more than their fathers. How could they slip into these sacrificial systems and worship other gods with these altars and so on so fast and so heavy and strong? Because they were always doing it, people. They came out of Egypt knowing how to do the sacrifices. It was before their eyes in Egypt. Yet the scripture says, do not do as the Egyptians. And Egyptians have a major ritual of sacrificing animals. And Israel comes out and does a major ritual throughout their lifetime of offering sacrifices of animals. And you don't say that the Israelites are doing the wrong thing by living as the Egyptians, by doing as the Egyptians do. Don't do as the Egyptians. But they said, we're going to go and offer up sacrifices unto gods, unto animals. But we will tell the people it is the Most High. Well, isn't that what Aaron did? Telling them that the bull is their God that brought them out of Egypt. They never made the calf until they already left Egypt. But he told the people, this is your God that brought you up out of Egypt. And the people, yay, and dancing and singing and enjoying it. So you see how a religion starts? Just tell people anything and teach them strong enough, and they will just start to do it. They will just believe it. That's how religion works. And that's why you were given books of religion on earth. Just tell the people something strongly, and if it's strong enough, people will just believe it, and some will catch on later and later. It will just pick up. The people know this bull didn't bring them out, because the bull did not exist, because they had to take off the earrings and jewelry to make it at that point. So the bull did not exist, but he just made it and told them, so they just took on the story and made it as a new institution, a new belief, a new system of faith, and began to do the thing that was already in their heart that they left Egypt with. They came out as Egyptian in their heart. So it goes on to say, to serve these other gods, to serve them and to bow down unto them, they ceased not from their own doings. They ceased not, which means they continued with the practice of setting up these altars of the Lord, which were really altars of somebody else. So the altars of the Canaanite gods, they said it was the altar of the Lord, just like Aaron said, this Lord right here is your Lord that brought us out of Egypt. When Moses was up on the mountain talking to the Lord that brought them out of Egypt. But he branded for the people a fake God and let the people accept the fake God as the real God. The fake altar as the real altar. The fake practice as the real practice. The fake ritual as the real ritual. The fake offering as the real offering to the Most High. The fake sacrifice as the real sacrifice, when the scripture said that the sacrifice is from your heart to live right and do justice and so on, and to obey the Lord thy God. So they branded in scripture the Israelite priests and so on, and so they had a practice of branding the wrong thing as the right thing and teaching the wrong thing to the people as if it was the right thing, and the people just went ahead with it. And you wonder why there's so much confusion with the Torah today and how a New Testament could have been built. It was easy to build a New Testament on a Torah lifestyle that was filled with many lies among the truth that's in it. Because they branded everything the same way they brand the New Testament as a New Testament, laying it on top of the Old Testament and tell you the old one is done, the new one is now real. Just like what Aaron did, he said, the God that brought you out of Egypt is not the God that really brought you out. This one is the one that brought you out of Egypt. Even though the people watched the thing being made. So it says they ceased not from their stubborn ways, from their own doings. These aren't the doings or the commandments of the Most High that they were doing, but their way to worship like this, a wrong way. And they were taught generation after generation that this is true. That's why the prophets would rise up telling them to turn back from Baal, like with Elijah and so on. Why? Because they ceased not from their doings and from the stubborn ways, like Judges 2 and verse 19 is telling you. They ceased not. So prophet after prophet would come many years after many years, captivity after captivity, punishment after punishment, and still be telling them the same thing. Turn around, turn around, turn around. You're going the wrong way. Why? Because they were going the wrong way. But the wrong way was as unto them a right way. Sweet was sour, sour was sweet. They mixed up the whole thing. They were corrupt. The zera of the nation was corrupt. The teaching of the nation was corrupt. The spirit of the nation of Israel was corrupt. And what you need to do now is to learn to rethink. You don't have to just say you believe me. Study it for yourself. Look into it again. Verse 22. That through them I may prove Israel, whether they will keep the way of the Lord to walk therein as their fathers did keep it or not. So he's trying to prove them here. So obviously, if he's trying to do all of that, he must have seen something that said, no, I need to see these people really want to walk with me, or to walk with the gods of the Canaanites. Judges 10 and verse 6 is going to show an example of the gods that the children of Israel served and taught it as it was the right thing. There's no way for generation after generation to come doing the thing if it was not taught as the right way. They were cultured in a way that said this is the truth and this is how you should live. Joshua 10 verse 6. And the children of Israel did evil again. You see that? Because it said earlier that they ceased not. If prophets are coming up later, it's because they ceased not. That's why it made mention when a certain king rose up that would clear the land of these altars and so on. It made mention of that because it was so strange, so odd to see someone rising up to do what is righteous, to choose the way of the Lord. And then the blessings would start to flow in and so on. But as soon as that king is done, like his life is over, they would go back. So the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord and served Baalim and Ashtaroth and the gods of Syria. See the gods that they're serving? And the gods of Zidon and the gods of Moab. See the gods again? You see the example the scripture is giving to let you know what they were doing? And they taught these as the right way. How did they know just how to do these things right away? Because they were worshipping these from the start. And the gods of the children of Ammon and the gods of the Philistines, and forsook the Lord and served not him. Who were they serving? Not the Lord. Who were they serving? These other gods. And they served not him. Their altars were unto other gods. And they taught the rest of the children of Israel and their children in their own houses that this is the altar of the Lord that we're worshipping with and sacrificing on. it was the altar of other gods that would have them slaughter their children and animals on these. And if you're telling me that the Torah is saying to bring a bullock or a lamb, well, writing is going to have to go with the worship system, because they have to teach. If they corrupted their ways more than the ways of their fathers, they're going to have to get that seeded into the new generation, and so on and so on and so on, if there is a teaching that goes along with the worship system. So they wrote in the instruction into the Torah, into their lifestyle, into their teachings. The words out of their mouths were words that taught the thing that they were doing. There's no way for them to not have taught it and written it. When even Ezekiel is telling you that even the priests were putting these things inside the walls. I did a lesson on that already. I'll do it again another time. Of the temple. So they were busy teaching these things. What's going to stop them from writing it? Don't you see Israelites today writing lies and teaching deception on the New Testament to be believed? They're writing it like that. And if people like myself and others who were doing it before me don't rise up and speak out against this, then in 1,000 years you will learn that the only thing to believe is the New Testament. Because Israelites are now writing and printing their own flyers and so on, and teaching you to believe in Calvary. So if Israelites are doing that today, why wouldn't they have been writing it back then? Israelites are drawing pictures and images that the Torah said don't do when they draw it of the image of Jesus. But they call him by special names that they made up. And you're thinking Israelites weren't dealing with images in the Torah and teaching it as though those images are to be worshipped? They were teaching, Israelites were teaching other Israelites to worship other gods through images that they taught as the right path of worship. This is your Torah. And I've taught that the Torah that we have been given is the public Torah, or the given Torah. I'll repeat it again and again and again. Because the public Torah is the Torah that the public was given. You don't have the Word of God. You have the Torah. It needs to be cleaned up. And you're going to show me the proof. Oh, but they found this in Qumran caves and so on. Did you notice where they found it? Qumran caves. I mentioned a small amount long time ago. I got more lessons to do on that. Qumran caves, you notice where they found it? You have any idea what it means to have found it? The scrolls, Dead Sea Scrolls and so on, and many other scrolls in the Qumran caves? In Qumran caves? Do you have any idea what that means? That means something anti-Torah was going on right there. But another lesson. So whose altar did Israel worship at and write Torah instructions about? The altar of the Lord? This is the altar of each Canaanite nation that they were dealing with, whose altars they did not break down. Now they would have had a smattering of their own altars that they built up fresh and new as well too, but the scriptures even tell us that they even use the stumps in the gardens when they chop down trees and they set up their shrines and so on in the gardens and so on. This is what they learned. And a lot of times when they were calling on the Lord God, they were calling on these gods that they were told was the God that brought them out of Egypt. And there is no real difference here in understanding it today with what's going on. Because isn't there an Israelite teacher here, there, teaching you that the Lord of Calvary is your God? That's no different from the Israelites back then in Bible times teaching you that this or that other God is your God. Aaron did it before these modern day 2018 Israelite camp teachers. He said, this is your God. This be your God that brought you up out of Egypt. These Israelite teachers today, they are not doing anything different than what the Torah people already did in deceiving the people. This Calvary God is yours. And they draw a picture and put even crowns of thorns on his head to give you a message that your God should look beat up and blooded up and beat down the same way you are beat up and blooded up and beat down today from slavery and so on. That's what they put in your mind. Because your God should be a picture of how you will remain in captivity, of how you will remain low down and at the bottom. They're not doing anything different than what already happened in the Torah. And this is a Torah that you love, for you will die for this. Why don't you choose to live for truth instead? Wouldn't that be more healthy? Mentally, spiritually healthy? So one of the earliest sacrifices of the nation of Israel was a major worship session after they left Egypt. And it was unto a false god or bull named Yahweh. And every time they did this stuff after they left Egypt, that's exactly what they were doing. Their earliest sacrifices were no different than the sacrifices of all the nations that were doing these sacrifices before them. Even the god Hathor was named Yahweh before Israel became a nation. And according to my findings, even before there was an Abraham, before there was a patriarch, before there was all these patriarchs that you knew about, Hathor was Yahweh, worshipped by the Egyptians and the people before the Egyptians or whoever else, can't remember now. And you tell me that your God is Yahweh in the scriptures, that the Israelites worshipped. It's gonna get real messy if I keep making these videos. But sometimes when you're really cleaning up stuff, things get messy. You're going through a deep spring clean and you start moving and throwing things here and there and it looks more messy than when you started, but you're cleaning out stuff and then you can now repack stuff properly and then it looks much lighter and cleaner in your house and more space and so on. But you messed up stuff first. You threw stuff on the bed, you dropped some stuff right here in this corner of the floor, in that corner of the floor and so on. Sometimes if it's really bad, you're just getting enough space just to walk in and out of the room to as you move stuff out and whatever, and you're throwing stuff out in the garbage and whatever. It looks messy and you know, but when you finish clean up and you pack up stuff back and you more stuff, cleaner, lighter house, and but it got messy at first. The altar of the Lord, you got to study that again in the scriptures and see whose altar it really was. It's rough, and I feel it for you going through these changes of for those of you who are sincerely seeking the truth. I feel it for you. I feel it for you. And I feel it for you when other people are telling you, don't believe that stuff, don't look into that, don't whatever. Because you don't understand that that's just religious conditioning to tell you don't look into something else. You got one life to live. Wouldn't you rather know? Wouldn't you rather choose for yourself than someone with religious conditioning using age-old religious tricks to get you to not look into something else? If you already have the truth, how can you be taken down by something else that you hear that easily? Then you weren't very strong. I've personally studied briefly, I think about 520 religions on earth over the years. And I've seen and known enough tricks. And thank the Most High, I'm breaking out of them. Still got more ways to go, but I'm picking out the tricks of religion. The altar of the Lord, thank you for listening, and all the best in your search for the truth.